Hey everyone, in today's review we are going to check out the Canson XL watercolor pad. Canson is a company with a very long history. They started making paper in 1557 in France, so that's like 400 over years ago. So for this watercolor pad, it's cold pressed paper. The paper is acid free. There are 30 sheets in this pad. It's quite thick. This is a 9 by 12 inch dimension. The paper weight is 300 GSM. Even though the Canson paper is labeled as having cold press texture, this is more of a fine grain rather than cold press. On the right side, this is the Daler Rowney Aquafine watercolor paper. This is cold press texture. So from what I can see, this is definitely much smoother. It's not hot press yet, because hot press is even smoother compared to this fine grain paper. I'll be testing the paper with some wet on wet techniques. This is to see how good the paper is at blending colors. Good watercolor paper should be able to let the colors blend together gradually, softly. This is cellulose paper, so the durability of the paper is not going to be as good compared to cotton paper. Usually for such paper, it's good for pen and ink sketches with maybe 2 or even 3 layers of watercolor, but not too much. If not, the paper fiber may come off. Cotton paper is definitely more durable. And not just that, with this particular paper, because there isn't a lot of texture on the paper, if you keep glazing on it, the paper will not be able to absorb the watercolor. Alright, now this is pretty wet. This is new gumbosh. We'll let the color blend into the paper. This is not too bad. Next, I'm going to paint a wet area and then paint in vertical strokes to see if the colors they can diffuse. So this is new gumbosh again. So when the wash is still wet, I'm going to paint some strokes within. So let's see if the red stroke, see if it can diffuse. With good watercolor paper, the paint should be able to diffuse softly and blend softly. So here it doesn't seem like you can do so. So on the left we have new gumbosh. We have a lot of new gumbosh. And on the right we have pyro vermilion. And now let me tilt the paper and see if the colors can run. This is a bit too much water, so let me just take out some of the water. This is not blending as nicely as I want it to be, so let me try again. This time I'm going to paint the whole thing with new gumbosh, and then I'm going to put the red paint here like this and let it sort of run down. So I'm tilting the paper like this so that the red paint can run down, but there is not a lot of movement here, even though the wash is still wet. The paint has dried. Let's take a closer look. So here I try to blend the color into the white of the paper, and there is some blending, but this is a bit too abrupt. This does not blend as gradually as I want it to be. In the next example, I painted several strokes of colors onto a wet wash. I wanted the colors to blend softly, to diffuse softly into the new gumbosh, but you can still see very visible vertical strokes here. Here I use a lot of water, that's why it's pale. But here you can see the blending. It's not as diffuse as I want it to be. Here I had 2 colors, one on the left, one on the right. I shifted the paper to let the colors blend together, but they don't really move much. I mean, they move up to the midpoint here, but they don't move further than that, even though the wash was really wet. And here I painted the whole thing with new gumbosh, added the red on the side here and tried to let the red flow down, but it just stops here. And this blending here, this is quite abrupt as well. So how should good watercolor paper behave? Let me show you. This paper is Fabriano Rosa Spina paper. It's 35% cotton if I remember it correctly. So here we can see that the colors, they blend into each other very softly. There is nothing abrupt here. The transition is not abrupt. Here I have a wet wash. I painted some strokes onto the wash and you can see the colors, they diffuse out very softly. This is how paint should spread out, should diffuse on good paper. So when you have this versus this, you can start to see how distracting the abrupt color transition can be. Alright, now I'm going to paint a sketch using this paper. Here's a sketch I have drawn on the Canson paper with pencil. Before I color this, let me show you the pencil texture on the paper. So this is how the graphite looks on this paper texture. So this is definitely smoother compared to cold press paper. Let me start by wetting the sky. I want to paint the sky with ultramarine and let the colors blend from the blue to the white of the paper. Maybe this is a bit too much paint. Now the paper, it doesn't absorb water as well compared to cotton paper. So a lot of water is going to run on the paper. And sometimes they can create streaking marks like this. Let me just touch up this area here. Let's create some puffy clouds here. Next, I'm going to use the ultramarine with burnt sienna to paint some of the shadows here. This whole area here is in shade, so let me paint this. I'm going to charge in some burnt sienna. For the ground here, I'm going to use new gumbosh mixed with pyro red. I forgot this part should be gray as well. Let me try and glaze over this area and see how the paper handles glazing. I think it handles glazing fine. So this is the completed sketch. Notice I have drawn the window grills using the white gel pen. Alright, let's take a closer look. This is French ultramarine and this is the type of granulation you can expect on this paper. Very fine grain textured paper. I would say that it can handle watercolor quite well if you do not use a lot of water, because as mentioned earlier, the water will run on the surface. The paper doesn't absorb water that well, so you have to control your water usage properly. This is 300 GSM paper, so the paper is quite thick, but if you do use a lot of water, the paper is still going to buckle slightly. You can definitely get some color transitions, but the blending will not be as gradual. The blending is going to happen in very small areas like this. Glazing works well, but I don't think this paper is capable of handling a lot of glaze. Anyway, you shouldn't use so many layers. 2 and 3 layers should be fine. I use some white gel pen here as well. This kind of granulation is actually very similar to hot press watercolor paper. So when the wash is still wet, I tried to blend ultramarine with burnt sienna, and this is the effect I get. We see some transition from the blue to the grays. So for small areas, I think blending it works fine, just that for large areas, blending it doesn't work that well. Here's another example where the area is rather small and the blending it works. If you want to use pen and ink with this paper, I think it's an excellent choice because this paper handles pen and ink quite well. The lines, they are very sharp. This paper definitely has its limitations. If you work around the limitations, you should be fine. If you ask the paper to do something that it cannot do, then you're only going to frustrate yourself. The paper texture on this side is fine grain. On the other side, it's even smoother. So this side is definitely not suitable for painting. I think this paper is good for smaller paintings. If you're going to paint large, you may have to work very quickly. You have to work in a more controlled manner to get predictable results, because results like this, I don't think they are very nice. They are quite distracting actually. But for smaller paintings like this, for controlled areas, small areas, you can still use wet on wet techniques, and that's fine. And colors, they actually look quite vibrant on this paper, so the paper doesn't dull down the colors, which is great. And that's all for my review today. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section. If you are also using this paper to paint and draw, I would love to hear from your experience. And by the way, if you want to check out the review for the Canson XL mixed media paper, the link will be in the video description below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye!